Hey everybody, welcome back to day 3 of the Mana Leek set review week. This is going to be the black set review. I'm not going to go over the disclaimers again. As always, this is a limited only set review. I'm not talking about constructed or anything like that. I may mention it here or there, but this is purely grades and discussion for draft and for sealed. I haven't yet played with these cards. I'm going to be playing with them soon, but I haven't played with them, so I haven't tested them. So this is just sort of a first glance review of these cards, how I'm going to be dealing with them for the first couple of weeks until I get some more experience. And finally, of course, these are my opinions. These are to encourage discussion. These are to encourage you to think about cards differently. Maybe you'll see something that you didn't think about before after hearing my discussion. And of course, maybe you'll see something that I hadn't thought of before. And you can let me know about that, of course. I'm not the absolute authority on these cards. I'm just one further opinion. But we're going to jump right on in today with the first black card, Alicia's Vanguard. So Alicia's Vanguard is a black creature, Orc Warrior at common for 3 and a black. And it's a 3/3, so we're looking at a 3/3 for 4. And there's only a tiny bit of rules text on this. It doesn't do anything else. All it does is dash. So dash is the Mardu mechanic, and I believe this is the first instance we've seen of dash. It says dash 2 black. So dash, the reminder text says, you may cast this spell for its dash cost. If you do, it gains haste, and it's removed from the battlefield to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. So basically you're giving your creatures kind of super haste. You're playing them hopefully as a surprise and saying, aha, I have this creature and he's going to attack this turn and then he's going to go back to my hand. It's an interesting mechanic. I'll talk about it. The casting costs are really all over the place. Generally, they're cheaper than the actual casting cost. Sometimes they're the same cost. But yeah, it's interesting. It obviously works really nicely with enter the battlefield effects because you dash it, it comes down, triggers the effect. You don't have to attack with it. It has haste, it can attack. You don't have to attack with it. Then you bounce it back to your hand. And so you can keep doing enter the battlefield effects just by using dash each turn if the creature happens to have an enter the battlefield effect. But this is as vanilla as it gets. This creature does nothing else. It's just a 3/3 that you can play on turn 4 and attack with on turn 5, or it's a 3/3 creature that you can play on turn 3, attack with, and have it come back to your hand. And then you have to, play it again for its dash cost or play it again for its full cost. This seems just kind of okay. It's nothing amazing. A 3/3 for 4 is a Grey Ogre. That's the historical Magic card. You'll often see people call things a Grey Ogre. And it's just kind of okay. It's not the best in this format. It blocks the morphs and everything early, but it pretty quickly gets outclassed when those morphs start flipping up and becoming 4/4s and 4/5s and 6/7s and other things like that. I can see myself playing this in a sort of super aggressive deck. Being able to get in for 3 on turn 3 would be kind of nice. There's very little that's going to profitably block this on turn 3, so you're probably going to get in for 3, but very rapidly after that, this just becomes less good. And, you have to start asking yourself, do I want to be spending, 7 mana on this? 3 mana to dash it one turn, 4 mana to play it the next turn? That means you're not doing anything else. If you have nothing better to do than that, your deck might be underpowered, or you've had a lot of bad luck and top decked a lot of bad cards. So yeah, I'm okay with this card. I'll put it in my deck, but I'll be looking to cut it. It's obviously not the same as the Yeti from Cons. I can't even think of the name of it right now, but the 2 red 4/3. It's kind of at that level for me where I like it. I'll put it in my deck if I have to, but it's going to be one of the cards I'm looking to cut pretty quickly. So I give this a C. It's just, it's just okay. It's not special or exciting in any way. There's going to be some cool dash cards later on, but this is unfortunately just as plain as you can get on a dash card. Alright, next up we have Ancestral Vengeance. Ancestral Vengeance is an enchantment aura for 2 black, so black, and it's at common. It says enchant creature. When Ancestral Vengeance enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Enchanted creature gets -1/-1. So when you play this, you're going to be playing it presumably on an opponent's creature to hopefully kill it. You know, you're going to be casting this on their X1, maybe just hitting their Frostwalker. It would kill the Frostwalker just by being targeted before the -1/-1 even gets applied. But you're probably looking to kill something with this. But then in addition to killing something, you're also not even bolstering one on your side, because you actually get to choose where that 1/1 counter goes to, which gets past why I'm hesitant about bolster. So I'm pretty okay with this card. It seems, you know, not all that bad. We're seeing a lot of X1s in this set especially, and there are definitely some X1s in cons, although not quite as many that are as powerful as the ones that we're seeing here. So I'm perfectly okay playing a -1/-1 enchantment. I can't remember. There's definitely a card that was basically this without the +1/+1 counter in one of the last few core sets, maybe the past 3 or 4 core sets, and it was perfectly good in a set with a lot of X1s. Adding that +1/+1 counter, that's pretty decent. I'm gonna give this a C+. It's cuttable if you have a lot of better removal. You know, something that says destroy target creature is a lot better than something that says hopefully destroy an X1 creature. So it's cuttable if you need to, but it's also just flat out perfectly playable, especially with so many X1s in this set. It will be interesting to see what happens with Dragons of Tarkir. I would expect Dragons of Tarkir to have a lot of dragons, which probably aren't going to be X1s, but as far as Fate Reforged and Cons draft goes, I'm perfectly happy to include this in a lot of my black decks. Next up, we have Archfiend of Depravity. This is a black creature demon at 3 black at rare, so this is our first rare. It's a flying demon, and it's a 5/4, so a 5/4 for 5 that flies. Already fantastic, and it's got more rules text, and it's not a downside. At the beginning of each opponent's end step, that player chooses up to 2 creatures he or she controls, then sacrifices the rest. Be careful that you heard that correctly and that you're reading that correctly. The first time I read this, I read it as that player chooses 2 creatures and sacrifices them. But no, this is your opponent chooses up to 2 creatures and then sacrifices anything else. So it's going to be kind of a one-sided, slightly worse for you, slightly better for them Dune Blast the first turn that this activates, and then every turn after that, it's not going to have any more of an effect. They're still going to, you know, choose up to 2 of their creatures. They probably have 2 left, and sacrifice the rest, which is probably going to be nothing. But you'll also have just destroyed their board and be sitting on your side with a 5/4 flyer, which is, you know, more than fantastic. A 5/4 flyer is huge, especially for 5. This costs 1 less than that uncommon dragon cycle that I'm hesitant about. It has a significant better ability than any of those uncommon dragons, and it has an extra power for 1 less mana. So this seems perfectly fine to me. This is perfectly first pickable. I'm going to be taking this every single time I see it, and it's going to always make every black deck I play. I'm not even that hesitant about the black in it. You know, I would have to be playing an excruciatingly light on black Mardu, Abzan, or Sultai deck to even consider cutting this if I actually had it. This just seems like a solid bomb card. You know, Butcher of the Horde had the same stats, 5/4, and it was amazing. Partly amazing because it cost 1 less and also had some pretty cool abilities on it. But this seems just as powerful, so I'm perfectly happy with this card. Solid A in my books. Alright, next up we have Battle Brawler. Battle Brawler is a creature orc warrior for 1 and a black at uncommon. And this is another of the cycle that cares about the other 2 colored permanents. So it's a 2/2 for 2 orc warrior. That already seems fine. Black-white warriors, of course, are very dominant. And black-white warriors would be perfectly happy to have a 2/2 warrior for 2. But it actually does stuff. As long as you control a red or white permanent, white being the key there if black-white warriors is going to continue to be dominant. Battle Brawler gets +1/+0 and has first strike. So if you're playing Black-White Warriors, you almost always are going to have a white permanent on the battlefield, even if it's just a little warrior token. Which means this guy's going to be a 3/2 first strike for 3. That is insane. That is super, super, super powerful. I'm very happy with this guy. I'm very upset that I'm going to have to face Black-White Warriors probably every single tournament yet again. And this guy's going to feature in it for sure. Yeah, I love this guy, especially in Black-White Warriors. And especially playing Mardu, playing Abzan. Anything that has a red or a white permanent, this guy's just going to be great. So yeah, I give him a B+. I'm going to pick him pretty highly. If the rare in my pack isn't awesome, I'm taking this guy easily. He just seems really, really, really solid for 2 mana. Just be aware, you could get blown out if you're attacking in with this guy thinking you're going to get an easy chump block or something because of the first strike, and somebody destroys your red or white permanent. That could happen. So, just keep in mind that these abilities aren't always there. Make sure you're always aware of what's on your board, what could get blown up, what mana your opponent's holding back, etc. But as long as that red or white permanent stays down, this guy's just fantastic. Next up, we have our first Black Mythic, Brutal Horde Chief. This is another creature orc warrior. This one's for 3 and a black for a 3/3, so we have a gray ogre. But this guy's a mythic, so you can bet there's going to be some rules text on him. He's got 2 paragraphs. First paragraph says, whenever a creature you control attacks, defending player loses 1 life. So it's Hellrider. But there's more, and you gain 1 life, so it's better than Hellrider. Hellrider was whenever a creature attacks you, your opponent takes a damage. This is whenever a creature attacks, your opponent loses a life, essentially taking a damage, and you gain that life. So if you attack with 4 creatures, your opponent takes 4 right away just by you declaring attackers, and you gain 4. That's an 8 life swing, and that is huge. That ability alone makes this card awesome. But there's even more. If you're playing Mardu or if you're playing Abzan, if you have any way of paying 3 Boros, so 3 red or white, then creatures your opponent control block this turn if able. And you choose how those creatures block. So every single creature that can block on your opponent's side has to block, and you get to pick how. So if you can, line up every single one of their blockers blocking your creatures in a way that all of their creatures die and all of yours live, you've board wiped them. Plus dealt a bunch of damage to them because of this guy's first ability. If you have, 4 or 5 creatures, and they have 4 or 5 creatures, but they're sitting at a low life total, you can just have all of their creatures block your lowest guy that you don't care about. And then the rest of your guys just get to walk on through and probably kill your opponent. This ability is absolutely insane. This card is a solid A+ in my books. I am first picking this every single time I see it. I am playing black every single time I draft this. This card is just huge. Maybe if you're in a super, super, super controlling Sultai deck, this may not be the best, where maybe you don't have a ton of creatures. This guy isn't a finisher on his own. But if you're playing even the slightly, even the tiniest amount of aggression, this guy's just huge. I love this card. It's barely underneath Torrent Elemental for me. This is probably my second most favorite card of this set so far. So yeah, I love this card. Take it. A+. Absolutely amazing. Next up, we have another rare, Crux of Fate. Crux of Fate is a sorcery for 3 black, and it's another of the choose 1 cards. So it says choose 1. Destroy all dragon creatures, or destroy all non-dragon creatures. So you can blow up every dragon on the board, yours and your opponent's, or you can blow up everything that's not a dragon on the board, yours or your opponent's. This seems pretty solid. End Hostilities has done really good in this format, and people don't tend to play around it. I've been blown out by end hostilities so often because I don't play around it. But this card just seems pretty good. Wraths generally aren't that awesome in limited, but they just seem to be better in cons. Probably because cons is so creature heavy. And with Manifest, I think creatures are going to feature even more prominently in this draft format. Now, whether or not to choose dragons or non-dragons depends on what's happening on the board. Generally, you're going to be choosing non-dragons. You are only opening a single pack of Fate Reforged, and there are, of course, no dragons in Khans of Tarkir. So odds are, any given draft is going to include, I don't know, I would guess 5 to 6 dragons on average. And you're not going to face every single one of those dragons, and no one person is going to have a significant number of those dragons. So you're probably going to be choosing non-dragons the majority of the time and just wiping the entire battlefield. There will, of course, be some awesome times where you are playing a dragon, and everything your opponent has is non-dragons, and you get to wipe their board and keep a really big thing, a really big flyer over on your side, and that's going to be amazing. But most of the times, this is just going to be a solid board wipe. Obviously best in a sort of Sultai control deck, a deck where you're going to be just kind of holding back for a while. You're just going to be maybe countering some things, maybe just killing some things, bouncing some things, making them play out as many creatures as possible, hitting Crux of Fate, and then playing your bomb. Just seems pretty solid to me. Not quite first pickable. I don't think board wipes are generally first pickable. Dune Blast being an exception because it wasn't a board wipe. It was keep your best creature and then board wipe, which is significantly better than most just flat out non-symmetrical board wipes. Symmetrical board wipes. So yeah, I'll give this a B+. It's not quite first pickable, but I like it. It's probably going to go in a lot of my decks. And if I have a dragon, I will pick this up probably a little bit more aggressively. If I have a black dragon, of course, or a dragon that goes with black. All right, next up we have Dark Deal. Dark Deal is a sorcery for 2 and a black at uncommon, and it says each player discards all the cards in his or her hand, then draws that many cards -1. So everybody, you and your opponent, discards everything in your hand, and you draw 1 less than what you discarded. This is awful. This is a solid F. I don't like this at all. You know, I don't like it. I don't like variance, as we've talked about. I don't like the randomness of throwing away a hand, although probably you're going to throw away a hand that no longer has much left in it. But if your hand doesn't have much left in it, you probably have 2 or 3 cards, in which case this is just going to draw you a card or 2. And you have no control over how many cards your opponent's going to have in their hand when they do this. So, you know, it doesn't seem good at all. I don't want to play this card. I don't want to take this card. It'll be cut every single time that I happen to end up with it in my pool. So yeah, I hate this card. It's a solid F for me. Never going to look to play it. Next up, we have Diplomacy of the Wastes. Diplomacy of the Wastes is another sorcery for 2 and a black at uncommon. Target opponent reveals his or her hand. You choose a non-land card from it, so anything but a land. That player discards that card. And then randomly, if you control a warrior, that player loses 2 life. This is also an F. This is also absolutely terrible as far as I'm concerned. Thought Seizes generally aren't that good in limited. You know, in constructed, you can Thought Seize and you probably know what your opponent's playing, so you can take the card that obviously would help them the best, and you probably have more Thought Seizes, and you just have more control over what's happening. In limited, you could Thought Seize and you could see nothing but boring little creatures, but those boring little creatures are going to run you over. Unfortunately, those boring little creatures are super replaceable with the rest of their deck. So these types of cards just aren't really all that good. The fact that maybe in Black-White Warriors you might get them for 2 life with this is terrible, because you'd probably rather have a 2/2 that will hit them for 2 damage, and then 4, and then 6, and then 8, and then more. Yeah, this card is just unplayable as far as I'm concerned. Despise is a little bit better. because it's cheaper. But even then, I don't even like Despise, not even out of the sideboard. So yeah, I don't like Diplomacy of the Waste. It's another card that I'm going to pass. It's another uncommon that I'm going to open and just feel bad about. I'm just going to hope that the other two uncommons are better, or that my rare is pickable over them as well. All right, let's see if we can get out of F territory here. We're into Douse in Gloom. This is an instant for 2 and a black. At common, Douse in Gloom deals 2 damage to target creature, and you gain 2 life. Well, we're out of F territory. This seems totally fine. It ideally comes down on turn 3, killing every morph, because, you know, they can't unmorph them on turn 3 most likely. You know, maybe you won't be able to kill off a Dragon's Eye Savant because they flip it, but 90% or more of the morphs that are going to come down on turn 3, you'll be able to kill off with this Douse in Gloom, and you get 2 life for it. You know, life gain isn't that good, but incidental life gain from something else that's really good is perfectly fine. Late game, you can kill off manifest creatures, you can finish off creatures in combat. This just seems totally okay to me. I'm going to give it a B-. You know, it's not a bomb, it's not unconditional removal, it's not incredible. You're probably not going to be first picking this card, but you'll be picking it relatively highly, and you'll be putting it in probably every black deck you play. So pretty solid B- there. Next up, we have Fearsome Awakening. This is a sorcery for 4 and a black at uncommon. Return target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. If it's a dragon, put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. This seems okay to me. I'm not a big fan of playing spells like Dutiful Return that return creatures to your hand, because it just becomes a pretty large mana investment there for a creature that may just die again. Returning from graveyard to the battlefield is typically a bit better, and this seems a little bit cheaper than you usually get this ability for. 4 and a black seems pretty good to get back your bomb or get back an important creature. If it happens to be a dragon, you can make it a little bit bigger, and you can bet that if you play most dragons, they're going to eat removal at some point. But that being said, I still don't know that I really like giving this a card slot. I'd probably just prefer another creature in most cases. I'm really torn on this because I do love return target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield, but I just don't know how useful it's going to be. You know, it's going to be really useful in those situations where your bomb came down and died, and you can get your bomb back again, probably for about the same amount of mana that you cast it for originally. You know, your bombs are probably going to be 5 drops or around there. But that being said, there's going to be a million situations where your targets are going to be 2 drops or 3 drops or really piddly little creatures that if they came back on the battlefield right now wouldn't really do all that much at all. So I'm just not entirely a fan of this. I'm going to go a little bit harsh on it and give it a C-. I want it to be better just because I do like that graveyard to battlefield flow, but I feel like this is a card that I'm going to play once or twice in my main deck and then realize it's just not good enough, and that I should just cut it. So I'm going to give it a C-, which is harsher than I would like on first glance, but I feel probably much more realistic than what I'd like it to be on first glance. So yeah, C-. Next up, we have Ghastly Conscription. This is the other black mythic. It's a sorcery, and it's 5 black, pretty expensive. Exile all creature cards from target player's graveyard in a face-down pile. Shuffle that pile, then manifest those cards. So it's kind of like Jeskai Infiltrator, where you get a pile of face-down creatures. Everybody knows what those creatures... Sorry, actually, in Jeskai Infiltrator, you don't know what the one card is, but you shuffle up that face-down pile, and then you lay them all out. So this is kind of like Fearsome Awakening. It's graveyard to battlefield in a slightly roundabout way in that they're all manifest creatures. Now they are all creatures, so every single one of those cards could flip over, and everybody knows what they might be. But that being said, this is just incredibly expensive. 5 black blacks. That's a 7 drop. It just seems way, 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 way too expensive, especially when you're probably going to be delving, which means you're going to be delving away creatures. So you're probably not really going to be want to be targeting your graveyard. It means you're going to want to be targeting your opponent's graveyard. And if you're filling your opponent's graveyard with creatures, that presumably means you're winning. You know, I just don't really like this card. Not only that, but if you take all of your creature or your opponent's creatures from their graveyard, the odds that they even are castable or flippable for you are pretty low, because you're hopefully going to have drafted an open color and your opponent's not going to be quite as highly in those colors. So it just seems like a really weak card for quite a lot of investment. Cool art. I like the art, but that's unfortunately about the best I can say about this card. So yeah, I have to give this I'll give it a D- because I like the art, but it probably deserves the F. Next up, we have Grave Strength. Grave Strength is a sorcery for 1 and a black at uncommon, and it says choose target creature. Put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard, then put a +1/+1 counter on that creature for each creature card in your graveyard. So you pick a creature, and you're going to give that creature some number of counters, but you don't know how many counters. You can count the number of creatures that are in your graveyard right now, and you know the minimum number. So if I have 2 creatures in my graveyard, I know I'm going to be giving my creature +2/+2. And then I take 3 cards off the top of my library, throw them in the graveyard. If they're all creatures, my creature gets +5/+5. That's awesome. If all 3 are lands or spells or non-creatures, then my creature does just get +2/+2, which is not terribly awesome at all. It's just kind of okay-ish for this card. But yeah, this is another of those sort of test your luck cards, which I'm seeing a lot of in this set, and I'm not a big fan of this. I'm not a big fan of the whole variance thing that's kind of happening here, and I'm not a big fan of this card either. I just don't like the card. I don't like the ability. I don't like the randomness of it. I don't like the fact that this takes up a card slot. I would probably prefer this, again, just to be a creature. You know, I don't want to be using this. And it has the same problem as Ghastly Conscription being used on yourself, in that, you know, you're probably going to be delving, which means you're going to want to delve those creatures away, which means they're not going to help power up this card. So yeah, I don't like this card as well. I give it a slightly higher grade. I give it a D, because maybe if you're not delving and you have a lot of creatures and you expect those creatures to die, maybe you could reliably make this +2/+2 or higher. But just in general, I don't terribly like this card, so I do give it a D. It's something that I'm not looking terribly forward to playing, and not something that I'm going to all that reliably keep in my deck. I'll probably cut it pretty liberally. So yeah, I give that a D. Unfortunately, a lot of the uncommons so far in black have been pretty underwhelming. But next up, we have a common. This is Gurmag Angler, and it has some really creepy art on it. It is a creature zombie fish for 6 and a black at common, and it's a 5/5. So that seems expensive. Well, it has Delve. Of course it has Delve. But Delve is also all it has. It is just a 5/5 for 7 that'll hopefully be less. You could definitely compare this to Hooting Mandrills or Sultai Scavengers. This is you know, a card that's hopefully going to come down on turn 5 maybe. If you've happened to gotten some cards in your graveyard even earlier, maybe a little bit earlier than that. And yeah, it seems just kind of okay. I think it's slightly less good than Hooting Mandrills. Even though it's a power and toughness higher, it doesn't have trample. So this really seems a little bit more like a blocker almost. I am almost surprised that it doesn't have Defender or something on it. It looks like a creature that would just sort of sit and wait for other creatures to come to it. But it can attack. It is a 5/5 that comes in, but it doesn't have anything on it. It doesn't have trample, it doesn't have flying, it doesn't have any sort of evasion on it. And that's going to keep the grade pretty low, unfortunately. Hooting Mandrills I liked. It went down a little bit over time, but I still rather like it, and I still take it relatively highly, and I still play it in basically every green deck. Sultai Scavengers I play in basically every black deck. This card, I don't know if I'd play it in every black deck. I think I would probably cut it relatively reliably. If I happen to have any way of delving earlier, so Rakshas's Secret, Scout the Border, something like that, I think this goes up a little bit. If you can get this down on turn 4 or turn 5, it seems really fun, but it's going to get, you know, outclassed by fancier creatures. Not necessarily bigger creatures, but fancier creatures, and it's obviously easily removed as well. So I'm going to give this a C-. It's a card that I will put into a deck, but I will also look to cut it pretty soon. There are obviously cards I'll cut sooner, like those uncommons that we've looked at recently, but yeah, I'm just kind of meh on this card. Meh is kind of the review that I have for this card. Next up, we have Hooded Assassin. Hooded Assassin is another of the cycle cards. It's the Aven Surveyor and the Sandstep Outcast cycle, where you play this card and you can put a +1/+1 counter on it or do something else. So it's a creature human assassin for 2 and a black at common, and it's a 1/2. And when Hooded Assassin enters the battlefield, choose one. Put a +1/+1 counter on it on Hooded Assassin, just like the other two. Or its second ability is destroy target creature that was dealt damage this turn. That's a very important phrase. I read this wrong at first. A lot of people have read this wrong at first or haven't really thought about it. This is not destroy target creature that dealt damage this turn. It wouldn't make any sense, and this guy would have to have flash for that to make sense. This guy would also be significantly better if that was the case. Destroy target creature that was dealt damage this turn. That means that you have to have pinged a creature. You have to have thrown a damage at them. You have to have burned them in some way. You have to have attacked them and not killed them, which seems like a pretty foolish attack in most cases, or otherwise very clearly telegraphs that something is going to happen. If I'm attacking my 2/2 into a 7/7, something is going to happen. My opponent should look at that and say, well, I have to think about blocking because something's going to happen here. This seems like a dumb move otherwise. And this guy will happen. Hooded Assassin will happen. So yeah, this guy's a 2/3 for 3 or a 1/2 for 3 that kills a creature in a super, super, super conditional way. I've seen a lot of people love this card and a lot of people rate it very highly. I don't know if maybe they're just not quite thinking about how this works out, but I don't really like this card. I like the 2/3 for 3. That's just fine by me. It kills morphs for a while until they unmorph. It just seems like a perfectly okay turn 3 play. I don't like the second ability. I find the second ability nearly worthless. You know, I just, I don't like it. I think it's super easily telegraphed. If I ever see my opponent come at me with an obviously terrible attack and I see 3 black mana, I'm not going to block that creature. I'm going to assume that creature essentially has Death Touch. So I'm hopefully not going to get blown out by this. I'm going to be so ready for this card, and I don't necessarily want to play this card. I'm pretty down on this card. I have seen grades as high as B+ for this card, but I'm going to go C-. I'm going to cut this card fairly reliably. I don't like this nearly as much as Sandstep Outcast. I don't like this nearly as much as Aven Surveyor. This could be the weakest of this cycle. I can't remember the red and green one offhand just at the moment, but it's one of the weaker ones for sure. So I give it a C-. I'm going to look to cut this card. I'm not going to take it highly at all. I'm going to take this on the wheel. I'm going to take this, pick 8 or less, or lower. Yeah, I'm just not a fan of it. I don't think that second ability is going to happen all that often. If it does, it may mean that your opponent's maybe just a weaker opponent and they're not thinking about what could happen when a seemingly dumb attack happens. But yeah, C- on that one. Next up, we have Mardu Shadow Spear. Mardu Shadow Spear is a creature human warrior for 1 black at uncommon, and it's a 1/1. So it's a 1/1 for 1. But it does stuff. It's not just a 1/1 for 1. First off, it's a warrior, of course, so it's got the relevant subtype, Warriors are very solidly being supported in this set along with Khans. But its rules text says, whenever Mardu Shadow Spear attacks, each opponent loses 1 life. In general, that means your only opponent in draft, of course, unless you're playing Two-Headed Giant or something like that. In addition, you can dash this guy. So this is one of the more expensive dashes. You can pay 1 and a black to dash this guy, to cast him from your hand. Has haste, it can attack if you want to, and then it goes back to your hand. So this guy's interesting. I think Black-White Warriors probably wants him. It's obviously on the much more aggressive side, significantly more aggressive side than Mardu Hateblade, of course. Mardu Hateblade I love as a 1-drop, just in general, let alone in the Black-White Warriors deck. This guy, you really need to be super, 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 super aggressive for. You need to be attacking every turn, right from turn 1. I don't know that I would ever dash this guy. I don't know that I would ever hold this guy back and then dash it. And late in the game, you're going to be dashing into probably a million things that can block this and kill it, or at the very least block it. So I don't know if it's that good. As I mentioned, must have been the white review, probably not the blue review, since that's not a warrior heavy color. You are going to have less access to the chiefs. You're going to have less access to Chief of the Scale and Chief of the Edge, which means this isn't going to be a 1-2 or a 2-1 as commonly as Mardu Hateblade was, for example. So yeah, this card is just kind of okay. If you're not a Warriors deck, I would just avoid this card completely. If you're the Warriors deck, this card gets a little bit better, but still I'd probably rather play most of the 2-drops. I'd rather play Mardu Hateblade, some other things like that. So I give this just kind of a solid C. It's very, very, very cuttable. If you're in Black-White Warriors, you can up this to maybe a C+, but you know, at the end of the day, it's a 1-1 for 1 that gets in for 1 little extra damage. The dash, I honestly don't see a reason for it. I don't know why I would ever dash. So yeah, not a huge fan of this card. It'll get the cut when need be. Next up is a card that's not going to get the cut, probably ever. Mardu Strike Leader. Creature, human, warrior, of course, for 2 and a black at rare for a 3/2. So a 3/2 for 3 already seems fine. And it has rules text, whenever Mardu Strike Leader attacks, put a 2/1 black warrior creature token onto the battlefield. So every time this guy attacks, you get another 2/1 creature, and it's not just a creature, it's a warrior. So it has that super, super relevant creature type. And that's not all. You can dash this guy. You can dash this guy, again, more expensively. You can dash him for 4. So for 3 and a black, you can have this guy surprisingly shoot out of your hand, attack if you want to. You probably want to be attacking with this guy to get that token, and then he comes back to your hand. So, you know, he even dodges sorcery speed removal, which is quite nice. He dodges any sorceries, he dodges any enchantments that might kill it, he dodges suspension field, I think hits toughness, so it doesn't matter for this guy. But yeah, the dash seems perfectly okay on this. I'd probably much rather just cast him on turn 3 all the time, and the warrior subtype is pretty huge as well. This just seems like a pretty solid first pick to me, and a pretty big sign that you want to be jumping into Black-White Warriors. The fact that that token is a warrior is amazing. The warrior tokens off of I can't think of the card. Timely Horde? No, not Timely Horde Mate. The Horde Chief. The Horde Chief. The tokens off the Horde Chief have been great. The tokens off of Herald of Anafenza have been great. The White Warrior tokens have been awesome. A 2/1 Black Warrior token sounds even better. And the fact that I get them just by attacking, which is what I'm going to be doing as a Black-White Warrior deck all the time, seems awesome. This guy is a solid A in my books. He's not quite a bomb. He doesn't finish the game by himself, but boy, can he get out of control. Next up, we have Merciless Executioner. Merciless Executioner is a creature orc warrior, of course, for 2 and a black at uncommon for a 3/1. So we have a 3/1 for a 3. I like 3/1s for 2. 3/1s for 3 are a little bit less good. I'm looking at you, Bloodfire Expert. When Merciless Executioner enters the battlefield, each player sacrifices a creature. So you sacrifice a creature, your opponent sacrifices a creature. Well, that's all right-ish. You know, you'll obviously build this up in a specific way. You'll make sure that you're not playing this when the only other creature on the battlefield is a bomb, and you'll make sure that you're hopefully playing this when your opponent has just their bomb or just an awesome creature. You know, you don't want to play this when your opponent has an embodiment of spring or something sitting on the battlefield that they would gladly sacrifice. But yeah, it just seems sort of okay. It seems like something that I would cut pretty readily. It could just be basically removal, because of course you could sacrifice Merciless Executioner itself. But yeah, it seems generally cuttable to me. I give it a C+. I'm going to want something on the battlefield to readily sack. A warrior token would be a good sacrifice choice. Maybe if you're in a hyper-aggressive deck and you play the Mardu Shadow Spear, you could readily sacrifice it and you wouldn't care as much. So, you know, in the right board state, I can see this being pretty decent, but I do feel like it requires a little bit too much finagling to make sure that it works. It requires holding it back maybe a little bit too long, which of course allows your opponent to further establish their board presence, which will give them more and more sacrifice targets. But yeah, this guy seems okay but cuttable. I give him a C+. He'll probably make my deck a little bit more often than I'll cut it. And especially if I'm playing a heavy creature deck or a deck with tokens, I'll probably include him a little bit more readily there. The fact that he's a warrior, of course, is pretty helpful. As I said, I think Black-White Warriors is just getting a big boost in this set, which it definitely didn't need. But we'll see what happens with Black-White Warriors. But yeah, C+ for this guy. Perfectly okay, fairly cuttable, but I'll probably play him a little bit more often than not. All right, next up we have our uncommon dragon for black. We have Noxious Dragon for a creature dragon at uncommon, 4 black, just like the other guys, for a 4/4 flyer, just like the other dragons. His ability says, when Noxious Dragon dies, you may destroy target creature with converted mana cost 3 or less. This is probably the best or the second best of these dragons, and I still don't terribly care for it. You know, I've talked about these dragons, so I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on this. I'm just not a big fan of 6 mana, 2 colored mana, 4/4 flyer. It's fine if you get there, but it could be tricky, and it's a late game play. And the ability seems weak to me, to be honest. A lot of people say, oh, this ability is awesome, you get to kill something. But you get to kill something pretty tiny. You know, this guy's coming out on turn 6 at the absolute earliest, dying on probably turn 7 at the earliest. And you're going to be killing a 3-drop or lower? Well, there's not that much that I'm really terrified. The upside is you could kill a morph, because a morph has a CMC of 0, of course, or a manifest. But that just seems like a huge gamble, and we've talked about how much I dislike variants. So yeah, I'm just not a big fan of this ability. You know, it's value. You get to kill something. I just don't think that something is going to be all that big, all that often. That being said, this is still better than the last 2 dragons we looked at. I still think killing anything is better than milling 4 or your opponent briefly not being able to cast spells. So I do give it a C+, but I'm not a big fan of this, just like the other dragons. The green one is the one that interests me the most. We'll talk about that in a couple of days, but this guy gets a C+. You know, if you get him down, the fact that he's a 4/4 flyer is going to be so much more important in almost all your games than the fact that he can kill a little guy if he dies. So yeah, C+ on him. Probably won't cut him unless I'm in an aggro deck, but I'm not excited to play him at all. All right, next up we have a card that I am kind of excited to play. It's Orc Sure Shot. It's a creature orc archer. Finally, we're away from warriors. For 3 and a black at uncommon, and it's a 4/2. So it's a 4/2 for 3, which is okay. You know, there's nothing wrong with that for sure. And it has a pretty good ability. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, target creature an opponent controls gets -1/-1 until end of turn. That sounds awesome to me. The fact that we've seen a lot of X1s. So I play a creature and I kill your X1. If I play 2 creatures, I kill your X2. And then it just, you know, goes on from there. Now, you're probably not going to be playing from your hand too many creatures. But can you imagine this in a tokens deck? Can you imagine this with Mardu's Strike Leader? I attack with Mardu's Strike Leader. A 2/1 black warrior enters the battlefield, and immediately, before we're even, you know, passing priority in the declare attacker step, something of my opponent's is getting -1/-1. If you can add on anything else onto that, this just gets even better. If you have this with Hordling Outburst, Hordling Outburst says put 3 1/1 goblins onto the battlefield, target creature an opponent controls gets -3/-3. That is incredible. So I really like this guy. I really like this guy in a token strategy. I just like this guy for the -1/-1. I like this guy for, you know, mild value out of every creature I play. And then the upside of being in a tokens deck or being in a very low curve where I can play a couple of creatures just seems incredible. You know, pairing this with the manifest, repeatable manifest card seems good. This guy just seems huge. I give him a B+. He's not a bomb. He doesn't finish the game, but he lets you take control of the game. He's first pickable for sure. I'm going to take him over probably a number of rares. And this is possibly the first black uncommon that I'm super excited to see, considering how weak the previous black uncommons have been. I suppose Battle Brawler was pretty high up there. But yeah, this guy just seems fantastic. Next up, we have another cycle card. We have the Black Siege, Palace Siege. It's an enchantment for 3 blacks. This is the most expensive one we've seen at rare. As Palace Siege enters the battlefield, choose Cons or Dragons. Cons. At the beginning of your upkeep, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Dragons. At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Both of those seem pretty good to me. I'm pretty happy to choose either of those. Both of them, of course, have their places. Cons in an aggressive deck would be pretty cool. You get to attack with your guys. They're gonna, you know, pick off your 2-drops and your 3-drops, and you get them back every single turn. You know, with Orc Sure Shot, you're gonna be dealing -1/-1 each time you recast those guys. It just seems pretty nice. The Dragons one seems awesome as well. It also seems pretty decent in aggro. A guaranteed 2 life loss for your opponent is awesome. The 2 life gain helps keep you alive when you're alpha striking every turn. And it also works really well in a grindy deck. You know, we've seen that Archer's Parapet does a really good job. If you're in Abzan or in Sultai and holding the ground, dealing 1 damage to your opponent was pretty awesome. Dealing 2 and gaining 2 is even better. So I'm pretty happy with this Siege. This is right up there with Citadel Siege. I probably would prefer Citadel Siege ever so slightly above this one, but this one I do give an A to. I do see it as first pickable. I am pretty happy to do either of these modes. I feel like I'll probably do Dragons more than I'll do Cons, but I'm pretty happy to have either of these modes, I think. So I give this an A, first pickable, and solidly putting me into black. Next up we have Karsi, I guess is how you pronounce that, Karsi High Priest. This is a creature human cleric for 1 black at uncommon for an 0/2. So it has no power. Rules text, 1 black, tap, sacrifice another creature, manifest the top card of your library. So this is interesting. If your creature's going to die in combat, or if your creature is about to get removed somehow, you could sack it instead and get another creature out of it, a creature that may be something even better. In addition, I believe this is the first sacrifice outlet of this format. I don't remember any being in cons. An Act of Treason is in this format twice with Jeering Instigator, meaning that you could always do the fun old trick of Act of Treason their bomb, attack with their bomb, and then sacrifice their bomb. That's always decent. I don't think there's quite enough support for that to be an archetype at all, like it was in M14, I believe, maybe M13. There was definitely a black-red sack deck. But, you know, being a sacrifice outlet is always good. Helping you get some value out of their removal is always good. Of course, they can see this on the board, so they'll know that you might do this in response to their removal. So they may hold it until you don't have a black mana up or something like that. But overall, this seems interesting. It seems like something that I really want to give a try to. I just don't know if it's powerful enough by itself without quite enough of a sort of sacrifice archetype being available. So I don't know if I'm going to take it highly, and I don't know if it fits in every single deck. I do want to try playing with it, though. I do want to see how valuable it is at making your opponent think twice about the removal, or being able to even turn off the removal a bit. It may be a card that I sideboard in if I see a lot of removal or a lot of burn or something like that. But yeah, I give this a C, a hesitant C, I'll say. I do want to see how good this is. It could go lower. If it becomes a sideboard-only card, it'll drop down to the D territory. I don't think it'll get much better, to be honest, but I will give this a C just for the possibility that's out there, just for the possibility of warping your opponent's removal decisions. But it could go lower, so be careful with this card, I would say. Next up, we have Reach of Shadows. Reach of Shadows is an instant for 4 and a black at common, and it says destroy target creature that's 1 or more colors. In other words, that says destroy target creature in the cons block except for 4 or 5 artifact creatures that exist. It might not even be 4 or 5. It might be like 3. So this essentially says destroy target creature. This is going to hit almost anything you want to hit. It won't hit morphs or manifest, unfortunately, but often not nearly as big of a deal. You know, when that morph on morphs, you can hit it in almost all cases, unless it happens to be Sagu Mauler or Witness of the Ages. But yeah, this seems like essentially unconditional removal. You know, there's a condition on it, but the condition isn't really all that important. Maybe in Dragons of Tarkir, we're going to see a whole bunch of colorless creatures. Maybe some Eldrazi, who knows? Probably not, though. I don't want to encourage or fan the flames of Eldrazi in every block. You know, it's a little bit more expensive than we're used to, or at least we're used to way back when with Doomblade and things like that. But this is actually decently costed for removal these days. You know, this is better than Sip of Hemlock. This is better than Rite of the Serpent. In almost all cases, again, there's just not that many creatures that this won't hit. It's instant speed, it's common, so I'm perfectly happy with this. This seems to be the black common that I would first pick if there wasn't all that many good rares or uncommons in my pack. Perfectly happy with this. It's going to make probably every black deck that I play, and it's going to be a card that I take relatively highly, so I do give it a B-. It doesn't go any higher because it is slightly expensive. I'd prefer, you know, cheaper removal, of course, and there's cheaper removal of types in this set, and, you know, things like Crater's Claws even that are more versatile than this. Again, I don't think it's a drawback that this doesn't hit artifact creatures, because there's just not that many, and of the ones that there are, a lot of them people just won't play. So, you know, I don't think it's too much of a concern that this has a condition on it. I would basically consider this to be unconditional removal. Next up, we have Sib-Sig Host. This is a creature zombie for 4 and a black at common, and it's a 2/6. So we're looking at a 2/6 for 5. Not the best stats. When Sib-Sig Host enters the battlefield, each player puts the top 3 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. This card seems bad to me. I don't like 2/6s. You know, Shambling Attendants was slightly okay as a 3/5, but that had a little bit more power, and it had Death Touch, which was pretty important, and it had Delve. This is just a 2/6. It doesn't have Death Touch. It doesn't do anything other than mill you and your opponent, which is bad in this format. As I've said before, every single color, or sorry, not every single color, but every single clan has access to Delve cards. So every single opponent you play, unless you're playing an opponent who's playing blue-white somehow, or sorry, no, blue has access to Delve, white-red somehow, which is possible, of course. You can play a white-red deck. It's just a bit more difficult. But unless they're playing white-red, your opponent has access to Delve, and you're very potentially helping them out by having them Delve 3. I'm not going to take this card. It's going to be last pick for me, and I'm going to probably just never play it. If I'm playing this, it's kind of the Rotting Mastodon sort of line of play, where I'm just against a super aggressive deck and I need a really big body on the battlefield. But even in that case, I would take Rotting Mastodon any day of the week over this card. So yeah, I give this a D. It's not quite, you know, absolutely terrible territory. It's not quite an F. It's at least a creature. You know, it's not something that just does nothing. But I'm giving this a D and never looking to play it. Next up, we have another Sib-Sig. I'm not 100% sure what Sib-Sig is, but we have Sib-Sig Muck Draggers. Sorry, Muck Draggers. It's another creature zombie for 8 and a black, so it's a 9-drop, at uncommon for a 3/6. Obviously, this has Delve. You're hopefully not paying 9 for a 3/6, but it does do something. It says, when Sib-Sig Muck Draggers enters the battlefield, return target creature from your graveyard to your hand. So this is what we talked about. I like graveyard to battlefield. I don't like graveyard to hand quite as much. I do like it on a creature. You know, I can't even think of the card. Gravedigger. Gravedigger was always okay. And actually, even a little bit more than okay, although it was significantly more cheaper than this guy is. But I still don't necessarily care that much about creature card from graveyard to hand. And I don't much care for it on a 9-drop. It has Delve, and as we've seen, Delve will often give you, in limited anyways, 3 to 5 mana off. So you're maybe looking at this as a 4-drop, which is okay-ish. But you can't reliably consider this to be a black mana. You know, you're not reliably going to have 8 cards. I've played Dead Drop a fair bit, and it's not all that common that I cast Dead Drop for 1. I usually cast it for 3 or 4 or 5. So yeah, I'm not huge on this card. I give it a C-, just due to that cost. Delve, I just don't find reliably gets me that much mana off. It does not get me 8 mana off. It gets me less than this. And I don't know that I want to pay 4 or 5 for this. 3/6 is okay. I'd, again, prefer it to have Death Touch or something. And, you know, as I talked about with, what was it? Fearsome something. Fearsome Awakening. As with Fearsome Awakening, there are going to be times where your graveyard has a bunch of guys that you don't really care to have back. Sometimes you'll get your bomb back, but the majority of the time you're just not going to have any terribly awesome targets that you want to spend an entire card slot, an entire turn, and an entire creature on. So I give this guy a C-. I'm not going to look to take him all that highly. I have never played Dutiful Return. Or no, I think I played Dutiful Return once, and I didn't care for it. At least this guy, you get a body off the creature return, but I'm still going to cut this guy much more often than play him, so I give him a C-. Next up, we have Soulflayer. Soulflayer is 4 black for a creature demon at rare, and it's a 4/4. So a 4/4 for 6. It sounds like our dragon. So what does it have? Does it have flying? Well, no, it has Delve. So it's actually maybe cheaper. We just talked about Delve. We talked about how, in my experience, it typically knocks off maybe 4 mana, which means that it would knock off everything off this guy, and he would be black for 4, and that's perfectly fine. He has more text, though. He has a lot of text. If a creature card with flying was exiled with Soulflayer's Delve ability, Soulflayer has flying. The same is true for First Strike, Double Strike, Death Touch, Haste, Hexproof, Indestructible, Lifelink, Reach, Trample, and Vigilance. So if you exile a creature with an evergreen ability, so an ability that appears in every set, so not Prowess, not Dash, but an evergreen ability, an ability that is, in core sets, Soulflare has that ability. So, in Magical Christmas Land, Soulflare could cost black for a 4/4 that flies, has First Strike and Double Strike and Death Touch and Haste, Hexproof, Indestructible, Lifelink, Reach, Trample, and Vigilance. You're not going to get that, of course. It would require one heck of a miracle in Draft or Sealed to actually get that to happen. But you can probably get flying. There's dragons. There's dragons that will be dead and in your graveyard. You could probably pick up Death Touch, First Strike, Lifelink, Reach, Trample, Vigilance. You can probably pick up one or two of those, and that's fine. I would be perfectly fine with a flying Lifelinker. I would be more than fine with a First Strike Death Toucher. I would be perfectly happy with a Death Touch Trampler, a First Strike Death Touch Trampler would be awesome. I'd be perfectly fine to throw Hexproof on this guy, although Hexproof is probably going to have to come from Sagu Mauler. I can't think of any other. I guess there's that blue Hexproof guy that I hate, the 4/2. I can't quite think of the name of it offhand. But yeah, you can expect to probably get one of these abilities at least. And with this guy being a rare, you can first pick him, and you can more highly value creatures that have evergreen abilities just to get them on the battlefield and get them dead. By itself, a 4/4 for 6 with Delve seems okay. The fact that it can be even better seems even more awesome. I definitely give this guy an A-. I like this guy. I think he could be bomb territory. I do think you need to build around him a little bit, but I don't think it's all that hard to build around him. You take this guy first pick, and then you just look for creatures that are in your colors that say something. Creatures that have some sort of evergreen ability. You pick up a dragon, simply because it has flying. You pick up something that has First Strike or things like that. Very importantly, this will probably come up as a judge question at some point, but the creature must have that ability. Battle Brawler doesn't have First Strike. Battle Brawler has First Strike if you control a red or white permanent. Battle Brawler doesn't just have First Strike. So Battle Brawler would not give this guy First Strike. The card doesn't just have to say the ability somewhere. The card has to say the ability in the context that that creature always has that ability. So do keep that in mind. I'm sure that will come up somewhere at some point. But yeah, I perfectly like this guy. I'll first pick him easily, and I will build around him. I will build the evergreen creature keyword deck and hopefully make this guy a really big, crazy guy. Next up, we have Sultai Emissary. Sultai Emissary is a creature zombie warrior. We're back on the warrior train. For 1 and a black at common. And it says, or sorry, it's a 1/1. So a 1/1 for 2. And it says, when Sultai Emissary dies, manifest the top card of your library. This guy seems alright to me. I'm not a big fan of him. I actually saw LSV's review today, and he's really big on this guy, and I'm not remotely as big on him. So first up, he's a 1/1 for 1. I don't like that. That is overcosted. That does not deal with most 2-drops that your opponent's going to play, and it sure doesn't deal with a 3-drop. That being said, it does replace itself. It replaces itself not just with a card, it replaces itself with a 2/2 creature on the battlefield. This kind of reminds me of Loyal Cathar from Dark Ascension. Loyal Cathar was a 2/2 Vigilance white creature for 2. So that was better than Sultai Emissary. But when that 2/2 died, at the end of your turn, it came back flipped over. It was a double face card. And on the other side, it was a 2/1 zombie that can't block. So the manifest creature is better than the flipped Loyal Cathar. The Sultai Emissary is worse than the Loyal Cathar on flipped. So I'm not sure where I put this card. I see the value in that it replaces itself, and I think this might be one of those cards that really depends on how good Manifest is. If Manifest is just alright, this card is just alright. If Manifest is good, then this card is a little bit better than alright. I don't think I would say it's good, but it's a little bit better than alright. So at the end of the day, I'm going to give this a C+. I will try it out. This will be one of the cards that helps me sort of value Manifest. It will help me sort of figure out Manifest. And if it doesn't perform, and I'm not super expecting this to perform all that well, then it'll get knocked down. I originally had this at a D-. I hated this card when I first saw it. Then I thought about the Loyal Cathar connection, and I thought about how much I did enjoy Loyal Cathar. For me, though, I think the fact that Loyal Cathar was a 2/2 by itself helped out. The fact that this is a 1/1 for 2, I think, hurts it a little bit. So I do give it a C+. I'm gonna play it, and I'm gonna main deck it to start. But I'm super ready to start picking it very lowly and never putting it into my deck if it doesn't perform. So yeah, C+ on that one. Next up, we have Sultai Runemark. This is the Runemark cycle, which means that it's an enchantment aura for 2 and a black at common. It enchants creature. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2. Same as the Abzan, same as the Jeskai. Same as those, your creature that you enchant is going to get some sort of ability if you control a green or blue permanent. So if you're playing Sultai, or if you're playing Abzan or Temur. Enchanted creature has Death Touch, as long as you control a green or blue permanent. So far we've seen Vigilance and we've seen Flying. Flying seemed pretty good. I was a decent fan of Flying. Vigilance, I was not a big fan of. Death Touch, I'm a fan of. I love Death Touch. Death Touch is awesome, but Death Touch is defensive. Death Touch is an ability that I want to use on a creature to have them sit back and block everything. I love 1/1 Death Touchers. Immediately, Sultai Runemark is going to make probably at the least a 3/3 Death Toucher. Making something a 3/3 is an aggressive move to me. Making something even bigger than that is an even more aggressive move to me. I don't really want to be holding back my Death Toucher if he's getting bigger. And so I'm really hesitant about this one. And it's strange because I love Death Touch, but yeah, I don't like the fact that it's an aggressive ability with the +2/+2 and a defensive ability with the Death Touch. So I actually give this a D+. I give this higher than the Abzan Runemark, but I give it lower than the Jeskai Runemark. Yeah, it just seems strange to me. I figure there's not really any other black ability they could have given. They could have given Fear, or Intimidate, I suppose, but that might have been a bit too powerful, actually. Those would have been really good abilities to give. Death Touch, I just feel, doesn't mesh that well with the +2/+2. And of course, as always, keep in mind you have to have the permanent down that's green or blue in order for it to even have Death Touch. So yeah, I'm not a fan of this one. This one will get the cut along with Abzan Runemark pretty regularly. Jeskai Runemark will only get the cut if I have something better, which hopefully will be often, but Jeskai Runemark will make the deck. Sultai Runemark, it's going to be a pretty bad draft where I put this in the deck. All right, next up we have Tasigur, the Golden Fang. This is another cycle card. This is the Ancient Ancestral Sultai Khan. So Tasigur, the Golden Fang is a legendary creature, human shaman, at rare for 5 and a black, and he's a 4/5. He has Delve, which seems perfectly fine. A 4/5 for 6 seems okay. A 4/5 for cheaper than that seems even better. This guy I like just because of the stats in the Delve, to be honest. Hooting Mandrills is 5 and a green for a 4/4. This guy's 5 and a black for a 4/5. That's even better than Hooting Mandrills. But he has an ability. He has an ability with the other 2 Sultai colors, like the other cons. He says 2 Simic, so green or blue, green or blue. Put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. Then return a non-land card of an opponent's choice from your graveyard to your hand. So you mill 2, and then your opponent picks a card for you to put back into your hand. But they can't give you a land, which is nice. They can't just give you a card that you probably don't want at this point in the game. So, as I said, I love the stats on this guy. This guy's fantastic because he's a 4/5 for 6 with Delve. That alone makes me want to take this guy and play him in every single deck that I play. The ability I'm not as big on. My opponent's going to choose the absolute worst card for me. My opponent's going to choose the card that I don't want. My opponent's going to choose the creature that I don't want. Over time, they'll eventually, hopefully, have to choose a card that I actually want. But I really don't like giving my opponent the choice for that. It's gonna cost a lot of mana and a lot of time to finally filter all the bad cards out of my graveyard into my hand. And then if those bad cards make their way out of my hand back into my graveyard, we're back in the same situation. So I'm not a big fan of the ability, to be honest. I'm just a big fan of the stats. The stats alone make this a B for me. The ability, I'll up this guy to a B+. I can see the benefit here or there. And of course you can delve away the cards that you don't want for any other delve cards that you happen to have. So you can try to manipulate the choice for your opponent a little bit. So that's a little bit better than just pure choice on your opponent. But I don't like the ability that much. I don't think it's going to be quite as awesome in Limited as it could be elsewhere. But the stats alone make this guy a B. The ability, I'll up it to a B+. I'm going to first pick him. I'm going to play him. I'll be very happy to go black with this guy. Yeah, not bomb territory. If that ability happens to actually blow me out of the water and be awesome, this guy could start to enter into bomb territory, but it's going to cost mana. It's going to cost setup. It's going to cost green or black, green or blue mana, so you need to be set up for that. But yeah, I think this guy is perfectly good, perfectly first pickable. Never cut him. And yeah, we'll see how he actually does. I think people might be a little bit overexcited for him. They might be kind of thinking about the constructed ability of him and not realizing that it may not be quite as good in Limited. In constructed, every card is in your deck for a reason, and you'd probably be pretty happy getting almost any of those cards back. In Limited, the reason a lot of cards are in your deck are because you happen to have them in your pool, and you may not necessarily want them back all that much. But yeah, B+, I'll take this guy first pick. I'll be happy to play with him just for the stats alone. All right, just a couple cards left to go. We have Tassiger's Cruelty. So Tassigar is back, and he is assaulting some guy's head. This is a sorcery for 5 and a black at common, and it has Delve as well. Tassiger is big on Delve. And it says each opponent discards 2 cards. So this is Mind Rot for a lot more mana. This is Mind Rot for 6, but maybe for 1. But probably not for 1, probably for at least 2 or 3, which is just Mind Rot or more. This actually fits into that sort of thing that I talked about yesterday with Will of the Naga and Rite of Undoing, where we have a card that's existed. In this case, it's a card that was okay. Mind Rot is okay. In the case of Will of the Naga and Rite of Undoing, the cards were actually good, and Set Adrift in cons. In this case, we have an okay card that now is way more expensive and has Delve, and so maybe sometimes, but not always, could be cheaper. And I haven't found those to work very well. Even Treasure Cruise, which is incredible in Legacy and Modern, and maybe getting banned, we'll have to see, isn't that amazing in Limited. In Legacy and Modern, 8 cards in your graveyard is nothing. You're going to be casting that for 1 pretty reliably. In Limited, 8 cards in your graveyard is a lot. That's nearly a quarter of your deck. And that means that probably something has gone wrong in your draft. All your creatures are dying. You're throwing spells left and right. So I haven't yet found these old cards made new with Delve to be all that awesome in Limited. Constructed, sure. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about Limited. So with Mind Drop being okay in most formats that it's in, I find Tassiger's Cruelty to be less than okay. Now, even worse than that, this is a Delve format. And as we've talked about, your opponent, unless they happen to be playing pure Boros, has access to delve cards, and you're helping them cast their delve cards. So Mind Rot would be like a C minus, a D plus. This being an expensive, most of the time Mind Rot makes this even lower. This being an expensive Mind Rot in a delve format where your opponent is going to have access to delve makes this a solid F. I'm never going to take this card. This is going to be last pick, and I'm never going to play this card. I'll play Rakshas's Secret because it A, is Mind Rot. It costs 3 every time I cast it. And B, it mills me, as well as the 2 cards that my opponent discards. So at least there, it's sort of neutral as to what it's doing for helping me with delve and helping my opponent with delve. And ideally, I know that I have delve, whereas my opponent, I just know that they could have delve. So yeah, Tasker's Cruelty, F, don't play that card. Play Rakshas's Secret if you really want this effect, and even then, make sure that you know why and when to play Rakshas's Secret. Alright, final card of black, we have Typhoid Rats. Typhoid Rats is a creature, rat for 1 and a black at common for a 1/1. This is a reprint. I don't know if this was originally printed in Innistrad, but Innistrad is the first place that I experienced it. It's a 1/1 for 1 with Death Touch. So we talked about 1/1s for 1 way back on like the 3rd card of the white set review, and I talked about how bad that card was. It was a 1/1 flyer for 1. Didn't like it, hated it, and I mentioned that later on there were going to be 1/1s for 1 that I did like. Now we're going to see a mythic 1/1 for 1 with 3 or 4 paragraphs of rules text on the green set review that I love. But this is a 1/1 for 1 that I like as well. A 1/1 for 1 with Death Touch is awesome. Mardu Hateblade has done a ton of work in and out of the Warriors deck. And it doesn't have Death Touch. It just has Death Touch if you keep a swamp set off to the side untapped at all times. This guy is Mardu Hateblade with Death Touch turned on all the time. And that does a lot of work. Baleful Eidolon did a ton of work in Theros. Now, of course, Baleful Eidolon was better in that it could give anything Death Touch by bestowing it. But this guy is just good. You know, he's not a bomb, he's not a first pick, he's not a second pick, he's not a third pick, he's not a 4th pick. But at that point, you're going to start looking at saying, yeah, I'll take a Typhoid Rat, I'll take a 1/1 Death Toucher. This blocks every ground creature in the game that doesn't have first strike and kills them, as long as they don't have indestructible. Perfectly happy with this guy. I give this guy a solid C+. I can't give him any higher because he is just a 1/1 for 1. He's not winning me the game. He might get in for a damage. You know, the rat can scurry across on turn 2. Maybe on turn 3 if your opponent doesn't have a morph. But the rest of the game, it's just going to sit back and just make your opponent not attack. And when they do attack, you get to kill their best creature, as long as it's not flying or has first strike. So I'm pretty happy with Typhoid Rats. I greatly enjoyed it in Innistrad. It was in a core set, either M15 or M14, I think. It was great there. Solid card. Make sure that you understand what I'm saying. I'm talking about how this is a solid card. Don't first pick it. Don't take it highly. But you're probably not going to cut this. You're probably not going to cut it out of any of your decks. And it's a card that I would even play 2, maybe 3 of, but probably not. If I'm playing 3, it means I'm a pretty controlling deck. But I would play 2 of these gladly, and I'll play 1 every single time that I can. Yeah, C+, great card. So yeah, so that's black. Black kind of runs the gambit. You know, we started off the set review, and I was giving F, D, D-. A lot of the uncommons seem weak, but there is a lot of good stuff in this set too. We ended up near the end of the set with A, C+, B+, A, B-, A-. Tons of good cards here as well, so it really does seem to run the gambit. I have a feeling that the majority of those good grades went to Warriors, or things that help Warriors. So I do think Black-White Warriors is going to get quite a boost from Fate Reforged. A lot of the cards I didn't like were kind of the Sultai ones, the ones that milled your opponent, and things like that. So I'm going to be continuing to be hesitant to go Sultai in this format, but I am going to be looking to still go Black-White Warriors and avoid it as much as possible. Mardu still looks perfectly fine because, of course, Black-White Warriors all fit perfectly well in a Mardu deck. But yeah, it looks like Sultai may be a little bit weak, which kind of just continues the trend from cons, I think. Overall, there's a number of cards I'm excited to play with in this color. I think Mardu Strike Leader will be super fun. I cannot wait to open a Brutal Horde Chief. I really hope I do. It's mythic, so I may not get it. Even things like Archfiend of Depravity, I quite enjoy. The Palace Siege, I really want to play with Palace Siege. Lots of cards I'm interested in here. I don't quite know where to rank black compared to blue and white. But yeah, overall, good color. I'll be looking to play it. Yeah, so if you enjoyed this set review, you can, of course, let me know. You can let me know if you have any comments, suggestions, or anything in the comments below. If you like the video, you can click that little thumbs up icon. You should also subscribe to my channel. That will let you know as soon as the next set review goes up and as soon as we get back to our regular Wacky Wednesday and Spiky Saturday schedule of events, as well as any other videos that might happen to go up. And it also helps me reach more viewers, which is always good. Helps me make more content. So you can find me on Twitter if you want to contact me there. That's the Mana Leek, L-E-E-K, like the vegetable, not the card. You can also find me on Facebook at facebook.com/themanaleak, and you found me here on YouTube, of course. As always, if you have any comments, questions, suggestions, disagreements with the cards, agreements with the cards, etc., let me know. Otherwise, I will see you all tomorrow for the red review.